Hello and welcome to coverage of Grand Prix Quebec City. I'm Marshall Sutcliffe in the booth with the Hall of Famer Frank Carson. Frank, welcome. We are ready for round 6 action here where we've got Shahar Shenhar playing Bant Tokens. He's up against Paul Dean. Paul is from Canada. This is a home country GP for Paul, and Paul is fresh off of his very first Pro Tour Top 8 just last weekend. So he's back here at the GP scene if he can run it up a little bit. Now, Shahar Shenhar, he's just one of our premier players in Magic, period. So he's kind of on a life heater and looking to just run that up permanently.
Former world champion, currently ranked 16th in the world. Tough to play against Shahar.
Yeah.
He picked up this deck, well, this morning, perhaps even, or yesterday. So he doesn't have a lot of experience with it yet, but he's capable of picking up these new decks pretty quickly. Now the Bant Tokens deck that he is on, creation by Sam Black, and it had the best record by far of all the decks at the PT. Sam Black, Justin Cohen and Ben Stark all played it to an 8-2 record in the standard rounds. It just features all the best cards, the best control cards in green and white. It's almost mono white, splashing green just for Nissa and Elvish Visionary. And it's a deck that doesn't really care too much about removal spells, but that tries to win the game with tokens from Retreat to Emeria, but also secure the wastes.
And even a Hangerback Walker, as we see here. So this turn sequence, by the way, was Paul Dean hitting his third mana, but just passing the turn back. Paul, kind of telegraphing that he maybe had an Obzon Charm there. And Shahar just plays his land for the turn, passes the turn back. And Paul obliges by playing his Obzon Charm on end step to draw a couple of cards and lose a couple of life. Now Shahar has to just sit here and watch, though, as Paul Dean hits his fourth land drop and plays Gideon, ally of Zendikar. He's also going to make a 2/2 Knight. Now, on end step, it looks like Shahar's going to crack a Flooded Strand here. And he's got some interesting options here. I know that in his hand, he's got a Silk Wrap. He's also got a Stasis Snare.
Well, first of all, he has to make the decision on whether or not to go for Canopy Vista and log up his green mana, or to go for a basic plane such that his future Battle for Zendikar lands enter the battlefield untapped. But I do think that locking up the green mana is more important. At the moment, Shahar doesn't have a great answer to Gideon. One thing that could work is that Shahar has Stasis Snare in hand, which if Paul would animate his Gideon into a creature and then attack, can just take it out all of a sudden. Alternatively, Shahar might be able to Silk Wrap the token and then start attacking Gideon, but that doesn't get rid of the Planeswalker yet. It takes out a nibble of the loyalty, but it's still gonna stick around.
So we'll get Paul to move his lands down below his other permanents there, as is mandated in the feature match area.
Yep, those are technically the new rules.
It just makes it easier for
standardize
the
layout of the board.
Yeah, it's nice just from a viewer perspective for coverage reasons. There we go. Thank you, Paul. So in the meantime, Silk Wrap takes down the Knight. Gideon takes a whack.
Yeah, but Shahar is still a bit behind here because he still doesn't have a great answer to the Gideon. And now there's a Siege Rhino as well coming down. Now Shahar, if he finds a land on the next turn, he can play Wingmate Rock with Raid, which is a nice way to eventually start attacking the Planeswalker and get back into the game. But at this point, his hand doesn't line up all that well with the threats that Paul Dean is putting out. One nice aspect of the Silk Wrap on the previous turn is that this will protect Shahar from future Dramoka's commands from Paul Dean. Even if Shahar would draw, say, Retreat to Emeria or some other key enchantment, well, if Paul has a Dramoka's command, Shahar can just sacrifice the Silk Wrap, give it back, and well, it was just exiling a token which is gone for good. So that could be a key interaction sometime later in the game.
So Shahar does find that fifth land that you had mentioned a minute ago, Frank, which is going to give him access to Wingmate Rock if he decides that that's the route he wants to take. Now, as the board currently sits, it would mean that his hangerback walker would have to kind of run into a siege rhino there.
Mhm.
Though that's not necessarily bad for him, right?
No, you want the flyers anyway to attack Gideon. One downside of playing Wingmate Rock, even rated over here, is that it weakens the planar outburst in Shahar's hand. Because, well, it would just take out his flyers as well. And actually Shahar can line up the sequence indeed of taking out both of the creatures, then attacking Gideon. Yeah, I like this much better actually.
Yeah, the
This
second
way-
copy of Silk Wrap was really nice here.
Yeah, it's a board clear. Oh, well, not a complete board clear because Paul Dean does have Murderous Cut for the Hangerback Walker to,
Ooh, this
to-
is a
to-
real game here.
yeah, to protect his Gideon. But, I mean, you still get the 2 tokens. Shahar is still in fine shapes for the time being.
Yeah, it was a nice turn for Shahar there.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, normally you're pretty bummed out using Silk Wraps on 2/2 tokens that were generated off of a Planeswalker, but that
Yeah.
play really did line up nicely for Shahar.
It's not like Paul Dean was presenting any other targets. He didn't have a Warden of the First Tree or an Unoffensa in the early turn, so
Mhm.
well, Shahar's happy to use his Silk Wraps to do anything basically.
Get him out of his hand.
There is an Unoffensa now.
All right, and it looks like Paul is going to get aggressive here. This is going to get in for a nice chunk of damage, 5, and also protect his Gideon from being attacked to death by the 2 Thopters next turn. And as you can see, he's put Shahar in a pretty tough position here now with Unoffensa the Foremost, though. I did just see a Stasis Snare come off the top of the deck for Shahar. He still has a Secure the Waste as well as the Wingmate Rock we talked about earlier.
Yeah, I do think that Shahar has the right tools to get back into the game now that he has hit his 5th land. Can start by attacking, nibble away at Gideon, then possibly raid the Wingmate Rock. Although Shahar cannot kill the Gideon this turn yet. He is at 10 life, and Unoffensa can actually attack along with Gideon, put a counter on Gideon, meaning that Shahar has to block. And if, for instance, Shahar would attack Gideon with both tokens, make Wingmate Rock, then if Paul Dean has 2 removal spells, Shahar is just dead.
He's just dead.
And that's why Shahar leaves back 1 Thopter token to play around those double removal spell possibilities. It's kind of a hedge. You kind of want to attack with 1 more guy and maybe whittle down the loyalty of Gideon, but you can't. In addition to that, if one of the 3/4 flyers lives, then that guy can already take out Gideon by himself. So
Yep.
it doesn't matter all that much whether Gideon is down to 1 loyalty or 2. And this way you do get to chump block, which could be relevant.
Uh-oh, here's Dromica's command now for Paul. He's going to put a counter on Unoffensa and take down the Wingmate Rock, the main one. So this was, stage 1 of what Shahar was playing around here is Paul having 2 removal spells. He's already shown him 1.
Mm-hmm.
So back to Paul Dean. And he kind of surveys the scene here after drawing his card.
And now if Paul attacks with both of his guys, and well, there's probably no reason not to. Although I guess you can make a token with Gideon, but I'd rather just get in there for a ton of damage. Then Shahar has to block. The only reasonable block that Shahar has is to chump block the Gideon with his Thopter tokens and fall to 5 life. And then hope that Paul doesn't have another removal spell for the bird token. If that is indeed the case, then the bird token can take out Gideon on the next turn, and then Shahar with Secure the Waste and Planar Outburst and all the good cards in his hand can take over the game. So Paul just has basically 1 or 2 turns to present relevant cards. Absent Charm, certainly relevant, because it means that Gideon will stick around.
There's a retreat to Emiria off the top for Shahar.
Mm-hmm. And the game is still not over. Stasis
Not at
Snare
all.
can take out Gideon when it attacks.
Yeah.
Shahar can chump block the Unoffensa with a Thopter, or if Paul has a removal spell, even make a 1/1 with Secure the Waste and chump block that way as well. On the subsequent turn, play Planar Outburst to clear the board, and then, well, essentially the board is clear and Shahar has a retreat to Emeria left in his hand. Alright, the attack with the Thopter token, a little on the aggressive side.
Why do you say that?
Well, because I initially thought that Shahar was going to play the Stasis Snare on Gideon, and then chump block the Unoffensa with the Thopter.
Now you think he's
And-
going to go for Secure?
Yeah, well, that seems to be the only reasonable
Yeah.
option here. I mean,
So I was
that's
thinking
fine too.
Create a couple of chump blockers. All of Paul's threats are lethal now.
But I guess if you're not playing the stasis snare this turn, you aren't developing your board in a meaningful way. You only present some chump blockers. The next turn you have to chump block, well, again, and eventually you'll still have to play stasis snare or some other cards to deal with the planeswalker or the unoffensive for good.
Well, this is an interesting spot. Paul does not have a creature to block with, so the shields are down for Gideon, but there is some risk here for Shahar if he wants to try to kill Gideon with just his creatures, which he is in range of doing here.
Mm-hmm.
But if he attacks with all of them and one of them gets killed, it's kind of a blowout.
Indeed.
That's
If that
interesting,
were to
isn't it?
happen, I think Char is just dead.
Yeah.
With the cards in his hand.
Right.
I mean, the playing the secure the waste instead of the stasis snare does allow him to kill Gideon now. So if Paul Dean doesn't have anything, this will work out better for Shahar. But yeah, if Paul has just a random murderous cut or something like that,
GG.
this is risky.
Yeah. Now the question is, can Shahar not attack Gideon this turn and just leave his creatures back and still have a line to actually win this game?
I mean, he can.
He could play
by like exiling Gideon with stasis snare when it attacks, then next turn play an outburst on the unoffensa and come back that way. It's possible.
Okay.
But on the other hand, Paul Dean, if he had a removal spell a couple turns ago, he probably would have played it already. So Paul
When he had
pretty
the
much has to have drawn the removal spell on the last turn, which doesn't give him a high probability. Could be Murderous Cut. Absent Charm doesn't even kill any of the creatures.
No.
Dromoka's Command does work. No, it actually doesn't, due to the Stasis Snare, which you can play in response. Like if Paul Dean would Dromoka's Command his Unoffensa to fight the token, you just exile it with Stasis Snare.
Yeah,
so the only card that you really have to be scared of is
Oh
Murderous Cut
no!
or
How about
Ultimate
Price? And it looks like Shahar may be paying the Ultimate Price here. He attacks Gideon down to 1, but he's left himself in a tough position here. He's a mana short of being able to play the retreat and also leave up Stasis Snare. You know, he could play a land, make a creature, make an ally, and then play Stasis Snare. But as it sits, Paul Dean, all he needs to do is turn his guys sideways.
Yeah, Paul may be scared of another Secure the Waste, which would allow Shahar to generate 5 tokens. Yeah, so maybe...
But Paul just ends up going for it even after looking at this, right?
Yeah, well, if Shahar has secured, then, well, that's just the way it is, but...
Shahar's like, don't do it. Don't. It's not safe.
But there's certainly a possibility that Shahar doesn't have it, as indeed he doesn't. I would go for it if I were Paul here. Shahar is just stone-faced.
Yeah, he wouldn't let him see it.
Nope.
And a little bit of a grimace there from Shahar Shenhar as
the bluff didn't work.
Maybe a misstep from him. He needed Paul not to have that removal spell, and Paul had it. He tried to take care of Gideon using his creatures to leave other resources for future threats, and it didn't work out for him. So Paul Dean takes game 1 against Shahar Shenhar.
Mm-hmm.
As you can see on our back tables, Frank, we've got John Stern, and on the right-hand side, that's Paulo Vitor Damarosa, 10-time Pro Tour top 8 competitor. That's got to feel good.
So already in game 2, there's a Falador Cup coming from the sideboard.
Looks like it's beating down here. John Stern's on this huge ramp deck that we had a chance to see in round 4. It's not quite the same build, but it's a similar build to the one that we saw in the hands of Mike Sigrist earlier. Now, for those of you just tuning in who may have missed that, we saw Mike Sigrist play Ulamog, the Ceaseless Hunger, 3 turns in a row. He just chained him right up.
Yeah, if 2 Ulamogs aren't enough, you have to play the third.
It's the third. Yeah. They never play around the third Ulamog.
They never do.
And this is how that works, by the way. This is Sanctum of Ugin getting sacrificed after Ugin goes on the stack or resolves. Yeah. And look at this.
Hello, Ulamog. And John Stern has 8 lands in play, including 2 Shrine of the Forsaken Gods, which do tap for 2 mana now. So he does have access to exactly 10 mana.
Mm-hmm.
Perfect.
You can see he's got an Ajadi offshoot down there, too.
I mean, it's blocking the Falador Cub.
Yeah.
I'm not even sure what this Cub is doing, it's not like John Stern has any enchantments in his deck. Maybe Paolo just felt like he needed a Grizzly Bear in order to pressure the ramp deck.
You
and it was
know-
better than some of the awkward removal spells in his deck or something.
I could see that.
Yeah, it's not why it's in your sideboard, but sometimes you have to make strange choices against decks that you may not have prepared for.
Yeah, Dark Jeskai is the tool of choice here for Paulo Vitor Rosa.
So Paolo looks like does have Ojitai's command in his hand, which may allow him to counter the Ugin on the next turn, or is it just a Colligan's command? I guess we'll find out soon enough. But one way or another, Paolo is not going to be able to stop the trigger from happening, exiling maybe 2 lands, setting him back a bit further. I mean, is that a Dragonlord Silumgar in Paolo's hand?
That's a Colligan's command that he's got at the front that looks like he wants to cast now. I'm looking to see if I can get a better view. Here comes Colligan's command. Yes, that is Dragonlord Silumgar, Frank.
Well, that could take over Ugin, and then...
Is that good? Stealing an Ugin?
Usually it is, but not so much when there's an Ulamog coming down on the next turn.
Ah. Now let's see what's going on here with Paulo. It looks like he wants to do 2 damage. Yeah, there's a judge here.
Yeah, I'm not sure what this is about at the moment.
By the way, that's
Well,
a Ruin processor that John Stern just discarded. How do you like
Okay,
that?
so one of the modes is discard a card.
Mhm.
And we've been calling it Palaka Worm while doing our drafts.
I like that.
It does a similar impression. I wouldn't really have expected it to show up in these ramp decks. We were considering it in a version with Conduit of Ruin, such that you can tutor for it, as well as From Beyond, the enchantment that can also tutor for an Eldrazi.
Mm-hmm.
But Johnstone has none of those. He's just running one random Ruin processor in his sideboard. I guess you can find it with Sanctum of Ugin, so there's
Yes.
still like some use to having it as a one-off
Yeah, they must have.
Silver Bullet.
Yeah, they must have just found that they were getting behind against some of the more aggressive decks and wanted that big life gain hit.
Mm.
Looks like Paulo is not going to steal Ugin. He's got a land in his hand, too. All right, well, our first match is back underway. Let's jump back over there as we want to keep up on that one.
Yeah, I think Paolo may be hoping to steal the Ulamog instead on the next turn. If all goes well and the Ulamog destroys the Soulfire Grandmaster in the land, Paolo top decks the land, and then maybe he can come back with his opponent's Ulamog.
Yeah.
It would be sweet.
Also,
but
if he plays the Dragon Lord, he'd basically be forced to just kill Ugin immediately,
Mhm.
as he knows that Ulamog is going to come eat up Dragon Lord Silumgar anyway.
Mhm.
All right, here is Paul Dean with a quicker start here. This looks like a turn 2.
Turn 2 Warden,
Warden.
After a turn 1 Duress, still a fine curve.
Yeah. The dress took away a Silk Wrap,
Mhm.
but Shahar still has Hangerback Walker on the battlefield, plus 2 more of them in his hand.
I think in general, this matchup might favor the banned tokens deck. At least when talking to Sam Black, he said he wasn't afraid of, well, Abzan, for instance. But if Paul Dean manages to draw a lot of Dramoka's commands for the key enchantments in Shahar's deck, or possibly Anafenza to answer the Hangerback Walkers, or at least prevent Shahar from making tokens
Mhm.
with them, then Paul can still take this game. Or, as we saw in the first game, if Shahar just has kind of a clunky hand with a bunch of 5-drops and doesn't line up his cards ideally against the threats that Paul puts out, well, the Absent deck can always take it down. Also see an Erase in Paul Dean's hand. That one came in from the sideboard.
For sure.
It's a great answer to all the enchantments in the deck from Shahar, from Silk Wrap to Retreat to Meria. Everything, basically.
Yeah, and he knows, of course, what Shahar's on now. Also, he saw 2 Silk Wraps and a Stasis Snare from him in game 1.
Mhm.
He knows he's going to have targets for it.
All right, another
Ooh,
Duress.
Another Duress. This one's going to miss, though. It's Elvish Visionary, Hangerback Walker, and a Wingmate Rock, so nothing to get there for Paul Dean. He's going to have to settle for the whiff on the old duress there.
Sideboarding against this banned tokens deck is tough because it doesn't present one specific linear strategy. It can come from so many different angles. Like a card like Duress, on the one hand you want to have it so that you can take out the Secure the Waste or some of the key enchantments like Retreat to Emeria. On the other hand, this green-white or banned deck also plays a lot of creatures and can grind out the late game with Wingmate Rock or Nissa, so that Duress can also easily fizzle. I think opponents had a lot of trouble figuring out how to sideboard against this deck at the Pro Tour, and even now that the list is out, it is unknown how to attack this deck correctly. And the Duress certainly didn't work out for Paul Dean in this game.
No, it did not. He got a Silk Wrap that he already has an answer to in his hand and then whiffed.
Yeah.
It's pretty brutal.
And meanwhile, Shahar is just ticking up these Hangerback Walkers. Now, the Absent deck is not all that scared of Hangerback Walker because of, well, first of Anafenza, which I already mentioned, but also Absent Charm, which is a clean way to exile it without leaving any Tapter tokens behind. But well, eventually both of these Hangerback Walkers are just gonna grow to, I don't know, 6/6 or whatever ridiculous size, and then almost none of the creatures in Absent can attack through it, except for, well, a Warden of the First Tree if you sink in enough mana, possibly Wingmate Rock, but so far Shahar has the advantage in this game.
It was Dromica's command off the top for Paul Dean. He's just going to play a land and pass a turn here, though. And Shahar's going to get to work on these Hangerback Walkers.
Yeah, some people might say that Virulent Plague is really good against banned tokens, and that is a sideboard card that we have seen many players gravitate towards for this GP. But I was actually talking to Sam Black yesterday, and he said that he wasn't all that scared about Virulent Plague, because the deck does have the capability of transforming into a regular green-white control or value deck with like some Den Protectors, some removal spells, just take out the Retreat to Emerias, and then those Virulent Plagues don't matter all that much, which is in line with my comment on how it can be really difficult to attack this deck while sideboarding.
Yeah, totally, especially if you have an idea of what your opponent's trying to do. You know, if you're sitting in Shahar's seat, you can figure out what kind of cards Paul Dean might be bringing in. You can certainly dodge those bullets. All right, well, he's got a couple of Hangerbacks now.
One got exiled, the big one.
These ones are still working their way up the chain.
I think Paul is planning to play Wingmate Rock, raided on the next turn. That could be a nice play. Although Shahar can easily block down the Warden of the First Tree if it were to attack. And actually Paul does not hate his 5th land drop, I don't think. His hand is Erase for, well, no enchantments yet. There was the Wingmate Rock. There's another Warden of the First Tree, but it's a card you don't really want to draw on multiples, especially when you only have 4 lands in play.
And he's got Dromica's command as well.
Yeah. Another answer to the enchantments that, I mean, maybe Shahar even boarded them out. Well, I guess there's still Silk Wrap in the graveyard.
Yeah.
It stays a snare in hand, but
No, it could have been interesting.
Yeah.
All right, well, here's the raid.
yeah, well, Shahar doesn't know that Paul doesn't have the 5th land, so
Right.
Wingmate Rock must be going through Shahar's mind at this point.
Right, that's what I mean is like if you're sitting in Shahar's seat, like it's got to be thinking about that.
Yep. So Shahar is thinking, okay, well, if Paul has Wingmate Rock, how do I block? I probably want to take out the Warden before it gets out of hand, so I could like block with one of my Hangerback Walkers. But on the other hand, there's always a risk that, well, if you, for example, double block with Hangerbacks, Paul has like an instant speed removal spell or something to rack up the combat. So let's see what happened here. Shahar must have blocked
He must have blocked with
with
all of them.